It's Malcolm Gladwell. Why a podcast?
Why not a podcast? It's the new exciting thing. What a chance to kind of reinvent myself at my old age.
But aren't you late to the game?
Oh, of course. I'm always late to the game, Larry. That's the story of my life.
Some critics say Malcolm Gladwell is prone to oversimplification.
I'd say they're absolutely right. I'm a journalist. If you want me to not simplify, then go and read the American Journal of Social Psychology. See how far you get.
Someone who seems revisionist every other day is Trump.
Yeah. He has achieved something I never thought a human being could achieve, which is he's unfact-checkable.
Plus, what do Americans get wrong about Canada?
They think Canada is boring, and they're right. But the thing they get wrong is that's a good thing. I mean, I could use a little dose of boring in the United States right now.
All next on Larry King Now. Welcome to Larry King Now. We're in New York City, and our special guest is Malcolm Gladwell, author of 5 New York Times best-selling books, The Tipping Point, Blink, Outliers, What the Dog Saw, and David and Goliath. He's a longtime New Yorker contributor. Malcolm has been named one of the magazine's 100 most influential people. His new podcast is called Revisionist History, about how the passing of time changes our understanding of the world around us. Why a podcast?
Why not a podcast? It's the new exciting thing, and it's a chance to explore a medium that I've never done anything. I've never done radio. I've never done. So it's like, wow, what a chance to kind of reinvent myself at my old age.
But aren't you late to the game?
Oh, of course, I'm always late to the game, Larry. That's the story of my life.
What do you make of this whole social media outburst, podcasting and Twittering and the whole world of communications?
I'm too old to be the kind of.
Why do you call yourself old?
I'm half joking, but I am 52. I mean, the people who are running the social media revolution are in their 20s, not in their 50s. So I'm sort of an outsider looking at it, but I kind of think on balance, I grew up in the newspaper business, and that world, the internet world, has destroyed the newspaper business. That's the downside. But there's an upside as well, which is that it's made it possible for lots and lots and lots of voices to be heard. And that, if we think about it, just a generation ago, if you had something to say, you had to go through a whole lot of hurdles to get the world to see it. And it's just in a space of 15 years, that's been completely turned upside down, and that's kind of amazing.
Your best bet was letter to the editor.
Yes.
And you're lucky if it got printed, right?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, tell me the concept of revisionist history. We're talking about stories that weren't true and are now true, stories that are true we now discover are untrue, or both.
Well, I'm more interested in both. And I'm also most interested in things that are misunderstood or unjustly forgotten. So, for example, the first episode is all about a painting painted in the 1870s and was bought by Queen Victoria. And it's hanging today in St. James Palace. And in its day, in 1874, it was the most famous painting in all of England. And the story behind the painting is completely fascinating. And it's not something anyone outside of a few art historians have thought about for 100 years, more than 100 years, 140 years. But the details of that story have enormous relevance for today, and that's what the whole episode's about. It's you're halfway through and you realize, wait a minute, he's talking about Hillary Clinton. Because the painting is a painting by a woman, and she's the first woman to kind of break into the all-male world of art in England. And the podcast episode is, what happens to her? What does it mean to be the first outsider? So in a certain sense, she's the Jackie Robinson of painting. But there's many ways. Jackie Robinson is a particular trajectory. I call that the pioneer trajectory. He opens the door, and within, a couple of years, there are dozens of African-American ball players in the major leagues. So the pioneer is the person who breaks down the barriers. But there's another phenomenon, which is the one I'm exploring in this story, which is the token. And the token is you open the door for one person, and then you close it behind them. And you say to the world, look, I opened the door to the one outsider. You can't, no one can fault my generosity or my...
That is revisionist because...
That story, you think that story is just about painting, and it's not. It is about how we treat outsiders, even today, and the various complicated psychological mechanisms that people in positions of power use to keep people from minority or outside groups down. I mean, this is in many ways the story of anti-Semitism in Europe for centuries.
Jewish.
Which is that you would let anti-Semitism in Germany. It's a really fascinating topic in the 19th and 18th century. It wasn't that they hated all Jews. they hated most Jews. They would always let a handful in, so they could say to the world, we're not anti-Semitic. Look, Moses Mendelssohn is our most famous philosopher, or Bertolt Auerbach is our most famous author, or, in the royal courts.
Some of my best friends are.
Exactly. That is exactly. Now that phrase, we use that phrase, as a joke. It's not a joke. That people use that logic to justify all kinds of discrimination. How can I be a bad person? I'm friends with, fill in the blank. So it is an examination. That phrase is exactly what that first episode is.
Was this tough research?
Was it tough or was it fun? It's only fun if it's tough. So I guess it must have been tough because it was fun.
You write about social science a lot, but you're not a scientist.
No, I'm a
You're
journalist.
a writer,
Yeah.
a journalist who investigates things a lot of people don't investigate, right?
Yeah, that's a good way to describe
Your
it.
curiosity takes you many areas.
Yeah, I mean, that's the great freedom of being a journalist. It's the one profession that gives you license to go anywhere. That's why it's the greatest profession in the world. It's like, what other job is there where it's written into the description, you can do whatever you want? I mean, it's kind of amazing.
Red Smith, the great sports writer, said, writing is easy. You put the paper in the typewriter, bring it up, and then you bleed. Is your writing painstaking?
No, it used to be, and then I went to work when I was 24 years old, 23, for the Washington Post. And you cannot, if writing is difficult for you, you can't survive at a daily newspaper. I mean, for too long. I mean, Red Smith clearly survived. But in the main, if you have to write every day, after a while, you just learn how to do it.
You worked for my friend Ben Bradley?
I did. Ben Bradley hired me.
The best.
A man, so much charisma.
Oh, the best.
No one I've ever met has had that much charisma. I mean, he was a rock star. I mean,
Change the room.
Yeah, absolutely.
Our guest is author and now podcast host, Malcolm Gladwell. Coming up, we'll look at the election. Maybe look at it the wrong way. We'll talk about that next. We're back with Malcolm Gladwell. His new podcast is called Revisionist History. He's a great writer. You got a new book coming?
I'm going to start working on one, I hope, shortly.
What's the idea? You're not going to tell me.
I can't tell you that. That's top secret.
When a writer, such as yourself, reporter, sees an Orlando, does he want to write about it?
Well, I did do a piece for the New Yorker
About school shootings.
on school shootings. The kind of writing that I do is best done at a certain distance.
So a Malcolm Gladwell might approach this story in a month, right? And go down and give us another angle.
Or 10 years. I mean, I don't think, one of the reasons that I wanted to do this podcast on historical events. So every show is about a different thing, person, thing, event, idea. One episode's about a song that happened in the past. And the reason is, one is that you get a special kind of insight comes from distance, which is the first thing. And the second thing is that I think we're really reluctant to re-examine our conclusions about the past. There's so much to be learned simply by going back and saying, we made up our mind about this that happened, boom, the day after it happened. And then we just let it sit there and never went back to say, well, was I right? Think about, there are all kinds of things you can learn years later that can fundamentally change your understanding of history and of how you reach your own conclusions.
In Lincoln's time, there was a proposal in the Senate to close the patent office on the concept that everything has already been invented.
Yeah.
Is there a famous story that we've revived everything about it? The recession has changed. There's a new book out about Benedict Arnold. I haven't read it yet.
Yeah.
And in this book, apparently, he paints Benedict Arnold as kind of a hero villain. He was led astray, disappointed in others. Washington liked him. He never set out to be a traitor. That's revisionist history, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, it brings to mind that famous epigram, history is written by the victors. And that's true. So the account that you get in the first go-round is written by the guy who won, right? So one of the reasons it's so important to go back and look at history again is you have to give other people a chance to speak. And I don't know whether the Benedict Arnold case is a good one or not, although as a Canadian, I'm fully prepared to accept the fact that he's a hero. But there are also people are willing to be honest with the passage of time. So one of my shows is about a song by Elvis Costello that came out in 1984, which I think is his greatest song. But it wasn't great at the time. It was only great when he went back and did another version many years later. And in reporting that story, it's about an event, a song that was released 30 years ago, right? After 30 years, people are willing to say things they would never say in a moment. So I talked to all these, the guy who produced the song was incredibly honest and interesting and funny and provocative about the song. If I'd interviewed him in 1984, he wouldn't have said any of those things.
And why do things change so quickly now? For example, it took blacks forever, and they're still working on getting equal treatment. But gay marriage is the law.
Yeah.
And that seems swift.
Yeah.
How did that happen so fast?
The gay marriage story is an incredibly unusual one, because you would have thought that of all of the social issues facing America, that would be one that we would wrestle with as long as abortion, right? But it turns out, no, it sort of went away, and we're still fighting about abortion. I think maybe it's a couple of things. One is that gays and lesbians wanting to join the rest of society, right? They want to do the same thing that the rest of society has been doing for millennia. And that, at the end of the day, is good news. People finally woke up to say, wait a minute, that's a fantastic thing and a beautiful thing. So maybe that's the difference. It seemed like it was a really threatening, challenging issue, and then people thought about it for about 5 minutes and they realized, actually, no, it's a very life-affirming.
Someone who seems revisionist every other day is Trump.
Yeah.
How do you explain him?
Well, he revises his own history.
That's right. How do you explain it to yourself?
He has achieved something I never thought a human being could achieve, which is he's unfact-checkable. I mean, the man was for gun control like 10 years
Adamantly.
ago. He was a Democrat for gun control, pro-choice. I mean, I could go down the list of everything. And then now he's somehow magically morphed into something entirely different. I think he is testing the limits of our kind of social generosity in this country. But I don't. He's a case. This is a great aphorism that lawyers use. Difficult cases make bad law. Donald Trump is a difficult case, and he makes bad law. I don't think you can abstract general principles about how society works from this one guy who was like, you must know him. He's a one in a million.
I know him 30 years.
Yeah.
But can we say, people say there's never been an election like this, and then we hear that Tyler's election was crazy, and Martin Van Buren had a war, right?
Yeah. There's never been a recent election like this. Although, all kinds of things, this election could get a lot crazier, or it could get a lot more normal in a hurry. I don't know.
I've been on the crazy.
Yeah.
Up next, Malcolm on his upbringing and his sense of faith. We'll be right back. We're back with Malcolm Gladwell. His latest venture is a podcast. It's Revisionist History, and I can't wait to hear them all. There's 10, right?
Yes.
Going to do more?
I'll do a second season if this one works, yeah.
You grew up in Canada.
Yeah.
What brought you to the States?
Well, I'm the classic immigrant. There I was in Canada.
Illegal?
I was briefly illegal, I will admit that, for like 6 months when I was in my early 20s. I was between visas. That was easier back then, before Homeland Security. But no, I grew up outside of Toronto, and I graduated from college, and Canada was in the midst of one of the deepest recessions in recent history. And so I said, what's the land of opportunity? And the answer is, the land of opportunity is the United States. So I had the same answer to that question that hundreds of millions of people before me have had. So I came down and I worked first in Indiana and then in Washington, D.C. Finally got a job at the Washington Post. And that's all she wrote.
What took you to the New Yorker?
I moved from the Washington Post I became the New York bureau chief here in New York, and then I didn't want to go back to Washington. So I cast around for things to keep me in New York, and I had started doing some freelancing for the New Yorker, and so I finagled my way to getting a job with them.
Is that a very demanding place?
The New Yorker?
They fact checks. They did
yes.
a story on me, and they fact checked it with the world.
Yes, yeah. The fact checkers are invariably smarter than the writer, work harder than the writer, and learn much more about the subject than the writer does. It is a demanding place. Oh, and the quality of the editing you get at the New Yorker is unlike the quality of editing anywhere else. It's in a whole different stratosphere.
Truth or revisionist? Did you have religion, lose religion, get it back?
Oh, interesting question. Well, I come from a very religious part of Canada, a very religious community, and my very religious family.
What religion?
Well, my parents were kind of mainstream Protestants, Presbyterian, but now my whole family are Mennonites.
Mennonites?
Yeah, modern Mennonites. They're not older Mennonites, not riding around in buggies. But and so I suppose I have. I don't think I ever lost it, but I have a renewed appreciation for its role in my life now.
Were you an atheist for a time?
No, I was never. Like I said, I don't think it was anything dramatic. It was really during the writing of my last book that I kind of began to take my own faith seriously.
What was your last book?
David and Goliath, because so much of David and Goliath dealt with. In the course of reporting that book, I spent so much time thinking about religion, talking to very religious people, and I sort of witnessed the kind of gifts that faith brings people. And I was like, this is just about the most powerful thing.
Someone told me the other day, if you started religion today, no one would buy it.
Oh, really? I don't agree,
Can't prove
actually.
it.
Yeah, but look, so much of what people believe in cannot be proved. I mean, I don't think there's any shortage of. I mean, one way of interpreting, to my mind, the way people behave in the modern world is it is this endless, largely fruitless search for substitutes for religion. That when you remove faith from people's lives, there's a void, and they try desperately to fill it with something else. Whether it's drugs or yoga or you name it. There's any number of religious substitutes people have.
Doesn't it all deal with death? No death, no religion. It's all death. It's a promise.
Yeah.
You'll be good. You're going somewhere.
Yeah.
Sounds like it was invented by rich people.
But then I will. You're probably right. No death, no a lot of things. I mean, do creative people create without the fear of death? I mean, I don't know. I don't think so.
What do you think happens when you die? It has to be what you think. It can't be what you know.
Yes, I think I go. I'll express it as a hope. I hope I go somewhere better.
I hope you're right.
Yes.
Who would Malcolm like to swap places with for a day? We'll find out in the game of If You Only Knew after the break. We're back with Malcolm Gladwell. You write about success and outliers. Is there one thing all successful people have in common?
That's a good question. I think I'm going to kind of cheat and give the obvious answer, which is that all successful people like what they do. It is impossible to be good at something unless you love it. There's just no way to fake it.
Driven?
Love has to come before drive, because the only reason you would be driven is if you liked it. So people put that first a lot of times, but no, that's second. You got to find what you like first.
Some critics say Malcolm Gladwell is prone to oversimplification.
I'd say they're absolutely right.
You try to break it down, right?
You got to break it down. It's otherwise I'm not doing my job. I'm a journalist. If you want me to not simplify, then go and read the American Journal of Social Psychology. See how far you get, right?
Okay, we play a little game of If You Only Knew. These questions, just throw them out.
Okay.
Who were your role models growing up?
You know who I was obsessed with growing up? William F. Buckley. When I was a kid.
Knew him well.
I'd read every one of his books by the age of probably 15.
Did you become a conservative?
I just wanted to be like him. I just thought he was hilarious and brilliant and a great writer, and I loved his way of looking at the world. That kind of, he just took so much delight in. I mean, if you knew him, you knew this, right?
I know him well, but he was wrong about a lot of things.
Oh, of course, yeah. I mean, so am I.
What's a guilty pleasure?
Well, I like to drive cars very fast. Perhaps that's a guilty pleasure.
What's the last great book you read?
I just read a book by Diana Mitford. She's the woman who married the British fascists during the Second World War. She wrote this autobiography that is so appalling, but it was fascinating. I mean, she's the worst human being who ever.
She was a Nazi. She was
more than that. She wasn't a Nazi. She was an apologist for Nazis. But the book is so appalling. It's just fascinating. You just can't. She's a whole chapter comparing how she knew both Churchill and Hitler, and she's like, they're a lot alike. It's like, what? Like, what? You read it, but anyway, it was just like, it was unreal experience reading this book.
What podcast do you never miss?
Bill Simmons' sports podcast.
Tell me the last time you were surprised.
I think I'm surprised every day.
Me too. How would you describe your job to a 5-year-old?
I would say that I walk around all day, I sit in coffee shops, and I write up my thoughts.
Who would you most like to trade places with for a day?
I'm a big runner. The greatest miler in the world is a man named Ashbel Kiprop. He's a Kenyan. I would like to be Ashbel Kiprop. I would like to know what it means to be able to run a mile in 3 minutes and 45 seconds.
When I was a kid, there'd never be a 4-minute mile.
Yeah, Ashbel could go a lot faster than that.
A mindless activity you enjoy?
Is running mindless?
I guess.
Going for a 12-mile run is pretty mindless,
Yeah.
and I get a big kick out of it.
What makes you angry?
I don't think I get angry.
If you weren't a writer, what would you be?
This is sort of crazy, but I think I would like to be a real estate developer. The idea of building buildings is fantastic.
Making money?
No. I don't care about the money. I care about the buildings. I'd like to be able to point at that building over there and say, I built it. That would be great.
That's what an architect told me once. He loves being an architect because you can drive on the street and say,
I did that.
I created that.
Yeah.
That's why Ayn Rand chose an architect for
Yeah.
the fountainhead. What's on your bucket list?
I went to Japan very briefly for the first time this year, and I would like to go back and spend a huge amount of time there.
What do Americans get wrong about Canada?
Well, actually, most of the things Americans think about Canada are true. They think Canada is boring, and they're right. But the thing they get wrong is that's a good thing. Can you imagine? I mean, I could use a little dose of boring in the United States right now. I mean,
Boring would be nice.
Boring would be nice. Yeah.
Best piece of advice you ever got?
I read it in a book about John Wooden, the great basketball coach, and he said, "Be quick but never hurry." I think about that almost every day. I just think it's so interesting.
Wow. Malcolm, so enjoyable.
Yeah, thank you.
Fascinating Malcolm Gladwell. So happy to have him. Revisionist History is available on iTunes and at revisionisthistory.com. As always, you can find me on Twitter at Kingstings. And we'll see you next time. On Larry King Now, he's made millions of us look at the world a little differently. It's Malcolm Gladwell. Why a podcast?
Why not a podcast? It's the new exciting thing. What a chance to kind of reinvent myself at my old age.
But aren't you late to the game?
Oh, of course. I'm always late to the game, Larry. That's the story of my life.
Some critics say Malcolm Gladwell is prone to oversimplification.
I'd say they're absolutely right. I'm a journalist. If you want me to not simplify, then go and read the American Journal of Social Psychology. See how far you get.
Someone who seems revisionist every other day is Trump.
Yeah. He has achieved something I never thought a human being could achieve, which is he's unfact-checkable.
Plus, what do Americans get wrong about Canada?
They think Canada is boring, and they're right. But the thing they get wrong is that's a good thing. I mean, I could use a little dose of boring in the United States right now.
All next on Larry King Now. Welcome to Larry King Now. We're in New York City, and our special guest is Malcolm Gladwell, author of 5 New York Times best-selling books, The Tipping Point, Blink, Outliers, What the Dog Saw, and David and Goliath. He's a longtime New Yorker contributor. Malcolm has been named one of the magazine's 100 most influential people. His new podcast is called Revisionist History, about how the passing of time changes our understanding of the world around us. Why a podcast?
Why not a podcast? It's the new exciting thing, and it's a chance to explore a medium that I've never done anything. I've never done radio. I've never done. So it's like, wow, what a chance to kind of reinvent myself at my old age.
But aren't you late to the game?
Oh, of course, I'm always late to the game, Larry. That's the story of my life.
What do you make of this whole social media outburst, podcasting and Twittering and the whole world of communications?
I'm too old to be the kind of.
Why do you call yourself old?
I'm half joking, but I am 52. I mean, the people who are running the social media revolution are in their 20s, not in their 50s. So I'm sort of an outsider looking at it, but I kind of think on balance, I grew up in the newspaper business, and that world, the internet world, has destroyed the newspaper business. That's the downside. But there's an upside as well, which is that it's made it possible for lots and lots and lots of voices to be heard. And that, if we think about it, just a generation ago, if you had something to say, you had to go through a whole lot of hurdles to get the world to see it. And it's just in a space of 15 years, that's been completely turned upside down, and that's kind of amazing.
Your best bet was letter to the editor.
Yes.
And you're lucky if it got printed, right?
Yeah, that's right.
All right, tell me the concept of revisionist history. We're talking about stories that weren't true and are now true, stories that are true we now discover are untrue.